hum of the engines vibrated through the cabin, a steady drone that masked the restless energy of the overnight flight. At 35,000 feet, somewhere over the Atlantic, the dimmed lights cast long shadows across the rows of sleeping passengers. Valeria, 34, slipped out of her seat, her chestnut hair tousled from the thin airline blanket, her slim frame wrapped in a fitted black turtleneck and jeans. She told her husband, Matteo, she was just stretching her legs. He'd nodded, half asleep, oblivious to the spark in her hazel eyes as she glanced toward the back of the plane. The bathroom door clicked shut behind her, a tiny metal box barely big enough to turn around in, and she exhaled, her breath fogging the mirror. She didn't know who'd follow her in, but she'd felt their eyes on her since boarding, two strangers, restless, watching. The lock hadn't even settled when it clicked again, and her heart slammed against her ribs. Hey, if that's got you leaning in, smash that like button and subscribe. This is about to take off in ways you won't expect. Door swung open, and in stepped Luca, a wiry man in his late 20s, with a crooked grin and a leather jacket that smelled faintly of smoke. Behind him was Anya, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a cascade of platinum hair, her lips painted red, her dress clinging to her like a second skin. They didn't speak, just crowded into the cramped space, the air thickening with their presence. Valeria's pulse raced, her back pressing against the sink as Luca's hand brushed her hip, casual but deliberate. You looked bored out there, he murmured, his voice low, barely audible over the engines. Anya's fingers trailed along Valeria's arm, her nails grazing the fabric of her turtleneck, sending a shiver down her spine. We thought you'd want company, she added, her accent lilting, her eyes glinting with mischief. Valeria's mind flickered to Matteo, snoring softly 10 rows up, oblivious to the storm brewing in this metal stall. They'd been married 6 years, comfortable, predictable, too predictable. She caught Luca's stare during boarding, Anya's smirk over a shared armrest, and something reckless had ignited in her. Now, here they were, 3 bodies pressed too close, the hum of the plane a heartbeat under their feet. This is insane, she whispered, but her hands didn't push them away. They curled into Luca's jacket, pulling him nearer. Anya laughed, a soft, wicked sound, and the game was on. Bathroom was a cage of stainless steel and flickering light, the mirror reflecting their tangled silhouettes. Luca's hands slid under her turtleneck, rough against her skin, lifting the fabric to expose the curve of her waist. Valeria gasped, her head tipping back as Anya's lips found her neck, warm and teasing, her perfume sharp in the confined space. The sink dug into her lower back, cold and unyielding, but she barely noticed. Her senses were drowning in the heat of their touch, the risk of it all. Luca's fingers traced higher, tugging at her bra, while Anya's hand slipped down, deftly unbuttoning her jeans. The denim slid low, and Valeria's breath hitched, her body arching into them, caught in the chaos of their hunger. There Matteo slept, his head lolling against the window, dreaming of their vacation in Rome. Here, Valeria was unraveling, her turtleneck pushed up to her shoulders, her skin flushed and glistening under the harsh light. Luca pressed himself against her, his jeans rough against her bare thighs, his mouth claiming hers in a kiss that was all teeth and need. Anya worked from the side, her fingers bold, exploring, her lips brushing Valeria's ear with whispered encouragements that made her tremble. The plane jolted a pocket of turbulence, and they stumbled, a tangle of limbs and muffled laughs, the danger only fueling the fire. Space was too small, the air too thin, but they made it work. Luca lifted her onto the sink, her legs wrapping around him, the metal creaking under her weight. Anya stayed close, her hands roaming, her body pressed against Valeria's side, a second pulse in the frenzy. The engines roared louder, masking the sounds slipping from Valeria's lips, sharp gasps, soft moans, a cry she couldn't hold back. Her fingers dug into Luca's shoulders, her other hand clutching Anya's wrist, anchoring herself as the world tilted. The mirror fogged with their breath, their reflections a blur of motion and heat, a forbidden dance at cruising altitude. Turbulence didn't relent, it came in waves, each jolt pressing them closer, amplifying the chaos. Valeria's turtleneck was a crumpled mess now, bunched around her neck, her bra shoved aside as Luca's hands roamed freely, his touch rough and unapologetic. Anya's dress had ridden up, the fabric stretched tight across her thighs, and she leaned in, her lips grazing Valeria's collarbone, then lower, leaving a trail of heat that made Valeria's head spin. The sink rattled beneath her, a faint clatter of metal against metal, and she wondered, absurdly, if it could hold them, if the plane itself could contain what they'd unleashed. Back in the cabin, a flight attendant passed Mateo's row, her cart rattling softly, her eyes scanning the dimness for any sign of trouble. He stirred, shifting in his seat, but didn't wake his dreams undisturbed, his trust intact. Valeria, though, was wide awake, her senses sharpened by the edge she was riding. Luca's breath was hot against her cheek, his hands gripping her hips as he pressed harder, the friction igniting sparks behind her eyes. Anya's fingers danced lower, teasing, relentless, and Valeria's body responded, a traitor to the life she'd left behind her seatbelt. The plane dipped again, a sudden drop that sent her stomach lurching, and she clung to them, her nails leaving marks on Luca's skin, her gasps swallowed by the roar of the engines. Air grew stifling, a mix of sweat and perfume, and the faint tang of metal. Valeria's jeans were tangled around her ankles now, a useless barrier, and she kicked them off, the denim crumpling into the corner. Luca's jacket hit the floor next, a soft thud against the tiles, and Anya's dress followed, pooling around her feet in a shimmer of red. They were a mess of exposed skin and tangled hair, their movements frantic, driven by the ticking clock of the flight. Valeria's head lolled back, hitting the mirror with a dull thunk, and she laughed, a wild, breathless sound that echoed in the stall. "We're going to get caught," she panted, but the thought only made her pull them closer. Luca grinned, his teeth flashing in the dim light. "Not if we're quick," he said, his voice a growl as he adjusted his grip, lifting her higher. Anya's hand slid up Valeria's spine, her nails scraping lightly, and she whispered something in her ear, something filthy, something that made Valeria's eyes flutter shut. The plane steadied for a moment, a brief reprieve, and they took advantage, their rhythm syncing with the hum of the engines. Valeria's legs trembled, her thighs tightening around Luca, her body a live wire sparking between them. The mirror was a smeared mess now, streaked with condensation, reflecting fragments of their collision, Anya's platinum hair, Luca's tensed shoulders, Valeria's flushed face lost in the haze. Out in the cabin, the fastened seatbelt sign blinked on, a silent warning ignored by the trio locked in their steel cocoon. Mateo's hand twitched in his sleep, brushing the armrest, but he didn't stir. Valeria, though, was spiraling, her senses overwhelmed by the press of bodies, the heat, the risk. Luca's pace grew erratic, his breath ragged, while Anya's touch pushed her further, a relentless tease that left her teetering on the edge. The plane shuddered again, a violent jolt that slammed them against the walls, and Valeria cried out, the sound raw, unrestrained, swallowed by the noise of the flight. She was close, so close, and they knew it, their hands and lips urging her over. And a knock, sharp, insistent, it cut through the haze like a blade. "Occupied," Luca barked, his voice hoarse, but the knock came again, louder. Valeria froze, her chest heaving, her eyes wide as she met Anya's gaze. The platinum-haired woman smirked, unfazed, her fingers still lingering on Valeria's skin. "They'll give up," she whispered, but the tension shifted, the spell fracturing. Luca cursed under his breath, stepping back, his hands still on her hips, reluctant to let go. Valeria's heart pounded, her body screaming for release. But the knock persisted, a flight attendant's voice now, muffled through the door. "Ma'am, sir, we need you to return to your seats." Anya laughed, a low, throaty sound, and began pulling her dress back on, her movements slow, deliberate. Luca followed, snatching his jacket from the floor, his grin fading into something sharper. Valeria slid off the sink, her legs unsteady, her hands fumbling to tug her jeans back up. The turtleneck hung loose, stretched beyond repair, and she smoothed it down, her fingers trembling. The knock stopped, but the threat lingered, a shadow outside the door. "Go," she whispered, her voice shaky, and Luca slipped out first, Anya trailing behind with a final, lingering glance. Valeria stayed a moment longer, catching her breath, her reflection staring back at her wild-eyed, flushed, a woman she barely recognized. She adjusted her hair, wiped the sweat from her brow, and stepped out, the cool air of the cabin a shock against her skin. Matteo stirred as she slid into her seat, blinking at her. "You okay?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. She nodded, forcing a smile, her skin still tingling from hands that weren't his. "Just needed some air," she said, and he drifted off again, none the wiser. Bathroom door clicked shut behind her, the stall empty now, but heavy with the echo of what had happened. Valeria stared out the window at the endless night, her mind racing. The flight wasn't over yet, and neither was the story. The seatbelt sign stayed on, the plane rocked gently, and she wondered if Luca and Anya were watching her still, waiting for the next move. Her fingers brushed her lips, tasting the memory, and she shivered. Whatever came next, she wasn't sure she could turn back.